coming, everybody. Just kind of update everyone on the 3 weeks on the job, and then getting set for the draft and free agency. It's been a very busy stretch. The major focus has been getting up to speed with the amateur scouting and pro scouting staff in advance of the draft and free agency. In addition to beginning to do some work on our staffing situation as we move ahead. So that's what's frankly taken up the time. We obviously have our own situations with our own pending free agents, both unrestricted and restricted. So we spent some time there, and then starting to get familiar personally with the city and the area, which has been great. So that is the very brief overview, and I will turn it over to everyone for the questions.
Seth on your left.
Hi Kyle. You re-signed Valtteri earlier this week. Have you made any other decisions on your other pending free agents, restricted or unrestricted? And by that I mean, have you made decisions that you want to try to re-sign before July 1, or will you opt to allow them to go past July 1?
Certainly, I think anybody that on the unrestricted side, if we're going to have those conversations, I think once you get to July 1, it opens up the field to the other 31 clubs. So anybody on that front that we're looking to bring back, I think we're having conversations with all of our people at varying depths just to get an understanding for where they're at. I think it would be remiss on my end not to have those types of conversations with them, just to get a sense of where they're at in the marketplace. I've been this my first month here. With the restricted free agents, we have a deadline of the 30th, so I believe that puts us at next Thursday at 5 o'clock to whether we want to qualify them or not. Valtteri, they had been having conversations with his people prior to me coming here, and I was familiar with him from his time in the American League and playing against the Marlies, and then going through the evaluation of him. So that one was good to get done with Steve Lenoir and his agent, Eric Heasley, here on our staff.
Josh on the right.
You've had a few weeks to analyze this roster now. Didn't make the playoffs last season, still a lot of talent. How far away realistically do you think this team is from being a legitimate cup contender? Do you think in the next couple of months you will have the ability and the resources to make them one?
I think the major resource that we haven't gotten unless I missed it on the walk over here, we haven't gotten the final salary cap, the upper limit numbers and lower limit numbers. The asset that we do have right now is we have cap space, and nearly $20 million in cap space or slightly more. Obviously we have some big needs that we need to fill using that, but what I've seen in the marketplace is that also puts us in position to acquire players from other teams that are looking to shed salaries, either to become cap compliant outright, or different players they want to re-sign of their own, that they have different needs that they've identified. And so the market has been that way really, I think, since the pandemic began and the cap went flat, where each summer teams can either pay a premium to offload people, or they can try to find a fit where maybe there's a team that believes it's close to contending or wants to contend, can take on players that can still bring in good value without giving up a lot other than giving up their cap space. So that's really the focus on it now. I don't believe, unless we're adding a very impactful younger player, that we're going to part with our younger assets, meaning like the Owen Pickerings of the world or our first round picks as we move ahead here. I think we have to build up the system, but that said, I think we're in a good spot and fortunate that the cap has remained flat because it allows us to take on people from other clubs that can bring us good value and have us push to contend.
Matt in the middle.
Hey Kyle, is a buyout a possibility with any of your players this summer, or do you not want to go that route?
I'm not a big buyout fan. We did in Toronto once, and I think it was one of the buyouts because the player was under 26. It actually gave us a cap benefit for the year and added to our salary cap by $600,000, and we kind of knew that when we acquired that player. It was right during the kind of height of our rebuild. I just think that there are more creative ways and better ways, especially in this environment where if you have contracts that you view as problematic or you're not getting great value from them, you can move them on, or you can try to I think the one thing I don't want to do is get into you see some of the buyouts, whether they go 2 or 4 or 8 years down the road. And we had that situation in Toronto on the retention trade to Pittsburgh with Phil Kessel, where you're looking at it 7 years on down the road, and you still have that space in a salary tight, hard salary cap environment as limiting you. So I think with regards to buyouts, I've always believed that you try to find a more creative solution, and it's a last resort. I don't feel that we're at that point right now.
Dave?
Kyle, thank you for doing this. Three of your unrestricted guys in particular, Zucker, Jari, and Dumoulin.
Yeah.
Are you optimistic about getting any of those done by July 1st?
We've had varying degrees of conversation with them, and so I've never kind of viewed David as being optimistic or pessimistic on it. I think it's trying to figure out what the market's going to be for them, and then whether our view of it aligns with the players and their agents. And we're still working through that process right now. Obviously, in Nashville, we'll have deeper conversations with each of their respective representatives, and probably have a decision about whether it's going to work or not here on all fronts by the time we get to next Wednesday, Thursday. So that'll allow us to plan going into Friday, Saturday free agency, and allow them to kind of set their course. If it's going to be here, that's great. If it's going to be moving on, we know we're going to have the cap space and be able to roll on. But it's still in the, I would say that the dance is ongoing right now with all of them.
Taylor?
What did you see from Jason Spezza working with him in Toronto that led you to bring him here today?
I just saw somebody that in the 3 years when he played for us was, had gone from being an all-star player, transforming into being a fourth line winger or center, penalty killer, and had taken on that role and taken on a tremendous leadership role with the group, and obviously impressive with his intelligence and the way that he handled every single thing that came his way during his 3 years as a player in Toronto, and how he handled the acceptance of a massive change in role in his late 30s. And then, when we talked to him after the 2022 playoffs, and it was, in our mind, it was time for him to kind of move on, and he had expressed the ambition to get into management, and then, so we built out a plan for him for the year, and to say he jumped all the way in would be an understatement. I mean, the amount of work that he put in on all fronts to try to learn as much as he could and advance himself as quickly as he could through the year was very impressive, and he has a certain way about him that he can, he's close enough in terms of his playing experience that he can help and relate to the players, but provide sort of that conduit between management and the players where he can hold them accountable, push them, but then also provide us some feedback of where we can help them without crossing any lines of confidentiality or conflict of interest, that he's able to sort of thread the needle perfectly. And I think with our group here, with where we're at now, but also where we want to go, his affinity for the development side, the minor league system, I just think he adds so much. And so to be able to have him come in here, I think is a massive benefit for me personally coming into this role, Taylor, but also just for the whole group, for the coaching staff, the players, for everybody in the building, just his demeanor and the way he goes about every day, his intelligence, his work ethic, and how much he's willing to learn from everybody involved. It'll be a great boost for us as we start to build out our staff through the summer.
Danny in the middle?
Kyle, since taking over, have you found anything that you believe might be a greater challenge than you initially thought, or inversely, is there anything that you thought initially might be a challenge that might not be as big?
I think for sure. I think when until you're actually in and doing something every day, you have your vision or view of it from the outside, but then when you immerse yourself in, you certainly see you certainly, once you live it, you have a much deeper familiarity, and I don't think it's ever the way that you envision from the outside. I think the thing that's really impressed me has just been the quality of the people here, and frankly, the how comfortable it's been in the city already, not just for me, but for my family, and just I think for us, I mean, I'm from Sault Ste. Marie. The time in Toronto, the city is much larger. The people are. It's a great city, but here it just feels a little bit more like home and what it was like growing up. So that part has been. You never know what you're going to get into when you make that type of move, and it's been for the first 3 weeks anyway. We haven't lost any games yet, so the people have been very, very kind. But it's been great that way. In terms of the challenges, I think it's the stuff that we're talking about. It's the roster continuing to it has a lot of experience, and but there's lots of cap space, and it's just trying to when you look at it, how are we going to go about trying to without depleting where we're going in the future? How are we going to best utilize the opportunity we have in terms of cap space with other teams kind of crunched to best support this group and have it move ahead? And so it's starting to kind of work its way towards a conclusion here as we get towards the draft, but that until you actually execute on those moves, you always have that doubt that it's not going to go perfect according to plan.
Rob?
Hey Kyle, I wanted to follow up on a couple of things. You were talking about cap space as an asset.
Yeah.
How do you view that once you get to the regular season in terms of being at the cap or having room? And also, you mentioned some needs. What needs have you assessed that there are in terms of just general for the roster? So.
Well, I think some of the needs are self-evident. I'll start in reverse, and if I don't get them all, just remind me. So I think some of the needs are, starting in reverse. To go back to Dave's question about the unrestricted free agent. So you have a situation in net where you have Casey DeSmith signed, and you have Tristan that's unrestricted. So and we don't have in the past year, whether it's been Tristan or Matt Murray or whomever, there've always been guys coming on go back to Marc-Andre Fleury, there've always been young guys sort of there. We don't have that yet. We have young goaltenders that we like, but nobody that's pushing. So there's gonna have to either be a solution with Tristan, or we're gonna have to, through trade or free agency, address that. On defense, Brian Dumoulin has been a staple here for a long time and a part of championship clubs. His contract is up. Can P.O. Joseph, can Ty Smith, can others jump into that range? We're evaluating that and going through that. Otherwise, you have a need there as well that needs to be addressed. Up front, on the UFA front, you have Zucker as a UFA, played in the top 6, and in that case there, you have to either find a solution with him, or you have to address it. And the benefit, to go back to the beginning of the question, Rob, on the cap space, is that we have the ability to do that. I don't think they're going to be the big splashy type of UFAs. If that's where we go into, they'll probably be more subtle bets, and we'll need to hit on them in order to have success. But I don't think you'll see us in the market for the long-term, highly expensive forwards, especially in free agency.
A few more. Josh, on your left?
Hey Kyle, as you kind of go over the next couple weeks between the draft and free agency, you mentioned the cap space, and I guess draft picks and free agents are two different things, but what kind of characteristics do you look for as far as filling the organizational holes and then the depth holes in your lineup?
Well, I think in terms of the organized, I'll talk about them in two different phases. I think in terms of the draft, it's going in and trying to, I don't think anybody that we draft, especially at 14, is going to make an impact on the roster, probably, speaking, just in probabilities, not for another couple of years, 2 or 3 years, at least. So the goal in the draft and the needs of our team, if we start to project them 2 or 3 years out, are totally different. So I think especially, and I know it's cliche to say you take the best player available, but I think especially where the organization is in terms of the prospect pool and where the roster's at, you absolutely can't start, you cannot worry about how a player may fit in 2 or 3 years. We have to get the best player we can at 14, or we have to, if we get multiple players, we can move up and acquire somebody that's really going to make a difference. Then we can do that. We can move back to collect more draft capital and really add to the quantity of our prospects. But they have to be the best players available. You'd like it to be spread equally when you come to the draft with 3 forwards, 2 defensive goalie, and roll. But for us, where we're at right now, we have to absolutely focus on just adding the best players possible. In terms of the NHL roster right now, I think number 1 is we need to add talent, I think, to the forward group. And I think last year the group here got great performances out of its core players and still missed. So we need to have players at the bottom of the lineup, or in the 3rd and 4th lines that can add certain utilities. Talent being some, penalty killing being others, competitiveness, speed, youth would be a wonderful thing for us to add with where we're at. That's a little bit harder in free agency because the younger guys tend to draw more in terms of term and dollars than we're probably willing to do, but there'll be players that will kind of fit that need, that maybe reclamation projects to an extent. And if we can make a number of more subtle small bets, I think that's what we want to in free agency, unless there's an absolutely perfect fit. I think that's usually the best way to go. So that's what we'll look to do on defense in terms of our depth. And when we get to the Wilkes-Barre portion of the depth, I think it's finding different elements, whether that's physicality, work ethic, defensive utility, talent that are going to be able to provide us with everything that we need as we go through the 82 games, especially with the age of the roster and the risk that imparts on the club.
Wes in the back.
Kyle, when you spoke with us a little bit ago, you touched on conversations you had with Mike Sullivan before taking the job. Now, it's been a few weeks. Just how is that relationship been building? Is there pretty constant communication, or are you kind of hands off with one another? Just how has that been building over the
There
past few weeks?
are no short conversations. They're all rather lengthy, but it's been great. It's always great to have a partner when you're working in this job in running the organization. The more communication and feedback you can get from the coach, the better. You're not always going to agree, and you're going to have to make decisions that the coach doesn't always love. But I think in getting his feedback and utilizing the coaching staff to break down, especially at this time of the year, I think the coaching staff doing work on breaking down players is really important, because the last thing you want to do is have a free agent come in here where the coaching staff also isn't at least aware of what you see in the player, or have broken down the player themselves. I think that's the best way that you can have success in free agency, is that there's that alignment as you move forward. There's in the end, the decisions are gonna come down to me to make in terms of what's best, Wes. But the relationship and the communications with Sully have been really, really great and enjoyable so far. And he likes to talk about hockey, which is what I think everybody in the room and all of us really like to do in the end. And talk about the team and how we're going to move it forward, and it's been great so far.
Last one, Dan in the room.
Kyle, just to clarify one of your early answers, you could foresee a scenario in which you maybe take on an unwanted contract from another team on the trade market to maybe fill a slot like left wing.
Sure. I mean, yeah, that's. I think we have to look at everything, and the cap space that the club has built up certainly affords us the chance to do that. So yes would be the answer on that front in terms of looking at players who may be available that kind of fit that exact criteria, or it could be taking on a contract that another team has to move, and rather than accepting draft picks back or what the usual return would be on shorter term deals, we could take back one of their players that they might have in surplus at a position of our own need. So of all the places that we've listed, which I mean, as we sit here today, are plenty, but when we get to mid-July, we'll have it stocked up and ready to roll.
I lied, we do have one man.
Hey, Kyle, more of a off the ice, away from the game question here.
Sure.
With the league's decision yesterday that teams aren't going to wear specialty jerseys and warm-ups this coming season, how do you foresee that impacting the team's work with different organizations such as Pride, Sports Matter, Hockey Fights Cancer, and things like that?
Well, I think in terms of one of the things, sorry, I don't know your name.
Patrick.
Sorry, one of the things, Patrick, that I think was appealing to us about coming to Pittsburgh and working for the Penguins and Fenway at large was not the work that the team has done in terms of what specialty night jerseys do they wear, or what are the performance side of different causes that you're supporting. It was actually one of the things that really appealed to us was what the organization actually does in the community and does with the different types of groups that you're talking about. So whether that's LGBTQ, military, Hockey Fights Cancer, I think whenever we've come in here on various nights, it's been amazing to me the job that the organization here does, and in talking to the Fenway group, it's the actual actions beyond the nights that I think are most important in this. And I think, I was back in Toronto on the first weekend, but the amount of support that the organization had for the Pride Parade here in Pittsburgh, the constant support in terms of what we're doing in hiring and in the community and different initiatives that the club has set up to battle racial inequality was one thing that really appealed to our family about coming here. So I think in terms of what the organization here will do in the community outside of the specialty jersey nights being apparently put on hiatus or that program ending, I think the organization here's history speaks for itself, and the organization will always do a lot and continue to do a lot to support all of the causes that are important in the community of Pittsburgh and the state of Pennsylvania, and as far as our reach will take us.